Hello, my name is David Newton. I'm appearing here today on Prosper's podcast show, and I'll be sharing with you some of the different secrets, tips, and laughs from my history in business.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, where we actually help you create a business that's profitable and enjoyable. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today, my guest, David, is a true Renaissance man. David, how are you doing, my man?
Very well, thank you, Prosper. And it's great to be with you and great to have a long conversation after all of this time. Thank you very much.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. We met ages ago. I think I was only just getting started, and you were a little bit patient with me on and off the platform. And we've stayed in touch, but we still haven't had that coffee, the famous coffee that we're supposed to have. Hopefully one day it's going to happen.
Yes, to use your words, my people will talk to your people.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep that going. I'm really excited about this for those that are watching right now, because I've known David for a very, very long time. Not only just knowing him as a person, but also just knowing the work that he has done. To be exact, he's not only authored over 60 books, and yes, I'm counting 60, and 40 of them are available on Amazon, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Look, half of those that are on Amazon are fiction books, and they're under multiple different pen names because they're kind of like not safe for work. But the all of the rest of the ones which are in my name, those ones are everything from tour guide books all the way through to personal development or business books. So there you go.
Absolutely. So we've got a literary genius in our midst here. I mean, seriously, not a lot of people can even write a blog post. Now think of 60 published books and more that we're not even talking about, because some are in other pen names. So this is quite remarkable. This is quite remarkable. And thank you so much for such a body of work. And I'm hoping we'll be able to condense all of that in the 60 minutes that we have on the show today. But not only has he just done the books, he's also the mastermind behind 2 successful social groups in Sydney and in Melbourne. And David wears many hats, not only when he's doing his tours, but when he is out and about. I mean, as a self-publishing veteran, a former futures trader, and get this, he's even trained in stand-up comedy. So today we're going to be in stitches as we
like that, yes.
as we unravel the greatness that has become of David. So if you've ever wanted to know how you actually blend maybe writing romance and novels and cracking jokes about financial markets, I think you're in the right place, because all of this is all going to be delivered in one fine episode that we're going to have with David. But David, I mean, before we actually dive into all this serious stuff, I've got to ask you, what's the hardest thing, writing a 300-page book or telling a joke that actually lands perfectly?
Well, they're 2 completely different things. I think the ultimate thing is it's self-expression. If you can come out with a good story and you're actually interested in being able to deliver that to the people that really need it the most, you'll find a way how to express it. And secondly, you've got to have practice with a lot of these things. Not all of these things are going to land on the day one. Like when I started my first business, I didn't even leave high school. I was selling calculators and computers when I was at high school. When I left school, which was a little bit earlier than normal because I could see that it was going to be very hard to get to year 12, so I left at year 11. And I essentially had figured out where I was going to buy the calculators wholesale, interstate. I grew up in a town called Wagga Wagga, and I was born in Brisbane. Now, in a little town called Wagga Wagga, everyone knows everyone. Have you ever been in a small town where everyone knows everyone?
I can only imagine. Melbourne is slowly becoming like that, you know. So
Well, that's true too. And if you catch a lot of plane flights like I do, you bump into everyone you know, usually more often than not at the airport, regardless of which airline you catch. However, way back in the early days when I started my business, I didn't even have a retail shop the first few months. That was, or shall I say, the first few weeks at least, until I secured being able to get a space inside somebody else's shop where I could at least have a counter. Technically speaking, it was probably about 35 square feet, or probably about 10 square meters. That was the size of my shop. Inside somebody else's shop, which was also inside a cafe. So people came in for the cafe. There was a homemade things shop, and then there was my little calculator shop where I also did electronics repairs and so forth like that. So, and I was lucky enough to have half of one of the window portions near the door. So when people came in, they saw my counter first, which is not a bad position to be in. Now, whether they went to the coffee shop or whether they went to look into the homemade things shop, I had this constant stream of people going past I was in an arcade, and the good part about being in the arcade, the rent was cheap, and the arcade was also a shortcut to a car park out the back and some other shops, as well as a major supermarket nearby. So people had to go through so talking about traffic in terms of today's world of being online,
absolutely.
I was in a prima donna spot for next to nix as far as my rent goes, because in a way they kind of the people who owned the two retail businesses that I was a part of needed me to be there because they weren't able to be there in the shop. So in a sense, I was ended up looking after a whole lot of other stuff rather than just my counter. That was a pretty good start. My early days was I met a lot of people. I got into sales and so forth like that, which laid a foundation later on. Probably one of the biggest things I found was that people came to me because they wanted to know the secrets of meeting people. And I'd overcome probably the most amount by being a shy computer type guy in high school to being a guy who could talk to other retailers. I was buying off a wholesaler in Melbourne and selling to chemists and photo shops and business shops other calculators and computers that I'd purchased off an importer. As a result of that, I had a good social life. I was going to the Chamber of Commerce. I was in other youth groups at the time. Bear in mind, I was in my teens. And I was in different organisations where people said to me, David, you always seem to get along well with people. And the leader of the groups would say, if you want to know about sales, go up and talk to David. He knows how to show you how to meet people. So other people had been volunteering me as being the one who would say, well, if you need some tips on it. And people used to come up to me privately and ask me, David, I want to meet this guy over here. Or if it was a girl, they would say, I want to know how to meet this guy over there. Or, girls and guys would come to me all the time and ask me about things like that in private. And I thought, this is really interesting. Why are they trusting me with this question? It wasn't until I left my first business and there was this little patch of time in between where I, wondering what I was going to do for my next endeavour. And one of the things that came to my mind was I was reading through some magazines at Wagga Wagga has a university. It previously used to be the Riverina College. And I was reading through these different magazines and so forth like that, business magazines, and they had whole page ads in there to do with singles and how to find the ideal date and so forth like that. So that would be something I would be interested in helping in that area, but I didn't know how I was going to go about it. Anyway, one of the business ideas that I came up with was running a sales course after I'd left my first business. And I hired all these different speakers, as well as I had different speakers for free. And I promoted my sales course, which was this one night a week over 6 weeks on Monday nights, and I promoted that on radio and television, once again on a zero budget, or it was almost a zero budget. And I managed to have speakers like Alan Pease as one of my guest speakers, but he was right at the very end of my one night a week lineup. And I had a few other local notable speakers from the Wagga region that people knew. But of course, Alan Pease was my major speaker. And because I mentioned some of those details, I got onto the radio quite easily. I was running ads on the radio and I was running ads on TV because they had a local section where you could pay for what was known as billboard advertisements. So you could get there right before the news, like in the last final 3 minutes before the news, there would be all these billboard advertisements, which you could buy for practically next to nothing. They were only like a card that showed up on the screen. So I bought a whole lot of those over 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
That plus the radio ads. And they gave me a lot more freebie stuff as well as a live interview in the studio. And people said to me, David, you're on the radio the whole time. Yeah, I wasn't really on the radio the whole time. It's just that people only listen to it between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. I only paid for 7 a.m. to 8:30, but people thought that I was on the radio the whole time. It's people's perception of this stuff. Anyway, it was a fabulous success. I sold out the room of about 30 people. The guest speakers did a great job. I didn't understand much about public speaking at that stage, although I'd had a little bit of a brush with it. But this really took me outside of my bubble as well. And various speakers that I had, some of them had books. Obviously, Alan Pease did, but some of the others did have books and other things to offer. And the audience members, some of those people, one guy tripled his income, another one went from being a manager of the local branch of the business that he was in to being a state manager, all because they'd done the course. There was a whole lot of different little things like that. And I repeated it all again in Albury-Wodonga. It was really fantastic. As a result of all of that, I later moved to Melbourne, and I had in the back of my mind, I would like to write a book. I had thought about this way back at the time when I was doing the seminars. But once again, I wasn't quite clear on where I was going to go. But one thing stood out to me the most was I was often asked to give little talks when I was learning public speaking. So I'd go back to saying, well, here's what I used to do, and here's this, and here's how I overcome my own shyness. And eventually, what that led me to was writing my very first book, How to Meet People and Make Friends Anywhere. So it was a fabulous immersion into writing my very first book. It happened as a result of a range of different things that happened whilst I was working at a temp job. Somebody was asking me for advice. I quizzed him about it eventually, whether he was going to do anything. It wasn't the case that he was going to do anything. It appeared to be. And I made a commitment to write this book within 6 weeks. As a matter of fact, I placed an ad in the magazine a whole month before the book was to come out. So I had to make a commitment for that part of it beforehand. So I knew I was really committed, and it wasn't even complete. The cover was complete, but the innards wasn't complete. And one of the greatest delights was to go to my mailbox in the CBD at that time, and I started receiving credit card orders and checks and so forth like that in the mail. Some people even attach cash. This was way back, of course, as you can imagine. And that was like, wow, this book was only an idea up here, and then now I'm receiving money for it. There was a whole lot of other surprises behind this book. Over the following 2 years, I received both bouquets and brickbats. Not everyone agreed with some of my philosophies. Not that anything in here is really startling. One psychologist gave me what I would call a dressing down over a lunch time meeting with her, and she said, the advice you've got in this book is blah, 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 blah. And she tried to outline a few things to me. And at the time I thought, ooh, this was quite shocking. So I actually ran away from my own book, would you believe it, for a few months. I basically thought, oh, you know, I didn't know how to handle that kind of critique.
You just suddenly gotten famous, David, and it's like, whoa, how do I handle this? But absolutely, absolutely great stuff. But David, this is all remarkable. I mean, this is like your life story,
Yeah,
in retrospect. But let's just go back a little bit so
yeah,
that we can, just catch up on a few things. You
sure.
started off by creating your own path by you starting this shop corner that you had and
Yeah.
fixing electronics and things of that nature. What was the actual inspiration? Had you seen that somewhere?
Look, a lot of the things were electronics was one of my hobbies when I was at high school, and I was pretty good at all of that sort of thing. I was given an electronics set as a kid, which I took to quite easily. I wasn't really interested in cars or other stuff like that. That was probably the case. Look, when you're in a country town, I didn't want to hang out with the people who were outside all the day, or that I found a lot of things could bore me quite easily. Uh, I'm probably, you might say, a bookish type of person.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, you were in a small town, you're a computer guy, so
Yeah,
obviously you just want your own quiet and peace. But then you opened up a whole world where people were now coming to you just predicated
yeah.
on the work that you were doing, even though you wanted to.
Well, that's true. And I think the other thing is too, one of the things that I learned with being in electronics is this. When I went out of my first business, because there was difficulties between the supplier and so forth like that, there was a whole range of things there that were happening. There was also a little retail recession um, going on. And somebody said to me, oh, David, with all of your skills, you could do blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, yes, that's true, because I had problem solving ability. And that's probably one of the biggest things. We all have resources, right? And if you can apply yourself in one area, you can apply that in another area over here. You can work out something over there. Like when I decided to make a real big push on writing a lot more than just my first book, I did a lot of research. I read a lot. I talked to a lot of people. Uh, there was one stage there where I brought up to 100 books on writing techniques and so forth like that, so that I could learn how to maximize my time in writing and get it better. But in any field or any endeavor, like when I was in the financial futures area, I had to pass an exam at a very, 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 very high level. Now, even though I wasn't all that too good academically, the pass level mark for being in the financial futures area was like 80%. So it took me 4 times before I eventually passed that exam.
Mm,
And when you have to go against those kind of odds, you have to apply yourself. There's no other way around it. I'm sure
absolutely.
you would agree.
I can only attest to that. But I think there's also an element of passion because with what you're saying, you brought together things that you're really passionate about, which is electronics, and you merged that with the skills that you now later on learned, which is connecting with people and actually relating to other human beings. How important is it for you to actually maximize on what you're really passionate about because it does take a long time for
Uh,
this to
look, I think probably one big thing is um, when I was younger, uh, my parents decided to buy a property slightly outside of town. So getting to meet people was difficult when I was at the age when I'd have a lot more time to hang out with my friends when we were living in the suburban part of Wagga Wagga, and then we all of a sudden moved to an area slightly outside of North Wagga, which was really rural. Like my parents bought a 15 and a half acre block of land. So just to get into town, even if I wanted to go in by bicycle, would take me half an hour or more just to ride my bicycle, quite a few kilometres. I later got a CB radio, which was good. I clocked up quite a lot of phone calls, which cost my parents quite a lot of money on the landline phone, which in today's money would be a horrific amount of money because I was making STD calls. I shudder to think what they thought of me because of the phone calls, but I just wanted to communicate with people. I suppose probably one of the big things is when I started my business and I moved back into town, everybody was around me. So that was a big thing. And I realised, the old saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. So when I'd moved into the rural setting, away from suburbia of Wagga Wagga, that's when you realise, hey, people aren't around me. They either have to drive to me or I have to go into town to meet them. So all of a sudden, what you take for granted as a kid becomes, high priority.
Mm.
You know,
Absolutely.
we're out on the Mernda railway line, so people have to be really committed to come out to see you, right? So
I can only imagine. So you went on and started doing these meetups and events that you were attracting real big names, even up to today. Alan Peace. I mean, he's written books on body
yes, that's true.
language.
Back in the early 80s, I was in a breakfast club called Salespeople with a Purpose, or SWAP, or Business Swap as it was later known. And with SWAP, I suppose probably one of the biggest things was we had guest speakers every week. So I got into the habit of going along to business meetings where people would swap business cards. They would stand up and introduce themselves, give a thought of the day, and then we would have a 5-minute member spot before the guest speaker, and then the guest speaker would speak for about 20 minutes, half an hour. And then everyone would probably leave to go to their business probably about 8:30 or 8:45, thereabouts, in the morning. And because I had a retail store, it fitted in perfectly for what I was doing. What was probably one of the strangest things for me was I paid, at the time, $45 to go to a one-day success seminar with one particular speaker that was from Sydney at the time. And I thought, oh, this is a massive amount of money. I couldn't even justify it in my head to spend that amount of money on going to a success seminar.
Well, it would have been an investment. And obviously, look at the quality of the people that you met and the draw that they also brought in for the events that you were putting out there.
True. No, but when I came back from that one-day seminar, apart from being tired as hell because I had to get up super early and then wandered back to my shop and everything, I felt an unusual feeling over my whole body that, wow, I learned so much. I didn't know how it was going to apply or whatever. But if there's, the old saying, get addicted to personal development.
Yep.
Well, that's what happened to me. That one seminar really transformed my viewpoint on personal development more than a lot of other things at that time. And I thought, there is really something to this. And that was a year before I ran my own seminars.
Absolutely. And I viscerally believe in life, we're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. So in order for us to live the best life, we need to actually learn how to be, do, and have that. And once we've done that, we need to contribute to others so that they too can be, do, and have, a happier existence.
True.
Now, your first iteration.
But when you're 20 years old, you probably don't know all of that.
But your first book, the one that you just showed us, how to meet people and actually make friends anywhere, in and of itself, I think it's a remarkable title. And the fact that, like you said, you told people about it, and a month before, people were already sending in checks and things of that nature. Is it still having the same?
No. Look, a lot of these books, when they go out of print, you don't realise just how much cost there are in doing it. And I'm happy to leave that one behind. I've got other books which are on my Amazon website which cover those topics and so forth. So if you like, I'll give you a link for all of those things later on.
Absolutely. So
hold on a second. I'm just trying to.
That's all right. So obviously you've been self-publishing for over 25 years now. You know, like you say, things have sort of changed and things are not like maybe they used to be, or
Well,
yeah.
self-publishing, pre-internet days, you had to do everything yourself. Look, if you wanted to get to go to a publisher, you will probably wind up with maybe that much amount of money back, if at all. Usually it costs to go to a publisher in a traditional sense, because publishers don't have the money to take a risk on just anybody who walks in the front door. You either
Mm.
have to be already famous, or something like that, where it's worth them taking a bet on you. I can understand. It just simply is the case. Having helped a lot of other people with getting their books printed and so forth like that, I've come across some people in the past that have come to my seminars, and they've said, when I've taught how to write a book, and for love nor money, they won't listen to you about how to write something that will work. Or if they do, it goes in one ear and out the other. They'll still do what they want to do regardless. That they just There's some people out there who just won't be taught. They just want to get it out for some other reason. And there are also some people who will do everything that they're told to do in order to get a book out. And if they get that book out properly, you know that they're going to go on and be a success later on, if it's for business or maybe a fiction book. And there are a lot of good fiction books out there. So a lot of people
Mm.
need to have fiction, otherwise we wouldn't have some form of escape from this material world.
I understand. Now, you've got over 40 of your books that are now available on Amazon. What sort of
Yeah.
advice would you give to an aspiring author who's looking to get their first book published?
Look, there's a few things. Don't knock back opportunities for writing in the meantime whilst you're still thinking of that great idea. I find that because I was often asked, I've been in a lot of clubs and organisations, and usually 15 seconds after I'd signed on as a member at different clubs and organisations that I'd been a member of, they'd said, "Oh, you'd be a good newsletter writer. Could you be our treasurer? Could you be our president? Could you be our sergeant at arms for the meetings? Could you look for the guest speaker?" I've done probably must have done something wrong in a former lifetime, because usually whenever I've joined up a club, they've volunteered me to do a
Absolutely.
committee position.
And you're talking of joining other clubs, but you also run your own social groups
I do
now.
these days. I'm a committee of one. So
In both in Sydney and Melbourne. So what is
yeah,
it that you find rewarding about bringing people together, and how are these groups actually complementing?
a lot of things really. Like, if I go back to the days when I was in other people's clubs, I always loved the camaraderie of new people coming into the club and meeting those who are more established that can introduce them around to other people. And that's what I find with my own groups today. I've got some people that have been coming along to my events for years and years and years and years and years and years. Um, I've got some people that have come to my events as far back as the 1990s that are still friends with me today, and they're in their late 80s. And, it's
Mm.
hard to put a price on, all because of the events that they attended way back, 3 decades ago. They're still friends with me. That's fantastic.
Oh, I can
It's
only
just
imagine.
incredible.
I can only imagine, and I can attest to that. We've only met online, but I feel like I've known you forever, you know. So thank you so much for that sort of demeanor around. And it's all
Yeah.
part of networking and how you do it. And
Yeah.
obviously you seem to be able to do that
You,
well.
that's true. Look, there's a lot of people do know everybody else out there. And even before the internet, the the shrinkage between connecting with anybody you want to know is getting less and less and less. And I'm saying before the internet because we live in a lot more connected world than a lot of people give it credit for. You know, you never know. You're usually 1 or 2 steps away from anybody you need to meet, if you need that for business, or if you're running a charity and you're looking for a connection through to someone special that could endorse a project or be a guest speaker or a guest singer at an event that you're running. A lot of people know a lot of people out there that are well known, and you're only just a short distance away from connecting with those people. So, and we don't utilize all of those connections properly because we like to do the hard work ourselves when in fact we can literally, if we go out to have coffee with our friends, we can find
Well,
out what their connections are. And then over time, if we say, I'm working on such and such, and they might say, oh, I know such and such a person who might be just ideal for that. And that will happen as a volunteer without even needing to ask. Somebody, people can volunteer connections for you if you're running a project or something like that.
absolutely, David. I think, I mean, as well read as you are, you would understand that if you want to go far, you go alone. But if you want to go further, you go together. And most people in and around us are only 6 degrees of separation from maybe your next
1 or 2
spouse.
degrees, really. It was Marconi, Guglielmo Marconi in 1909. You can look up this
Yeah,
on Wikipedia. He
yeah.
was the one who first suggested that we were around about 5 or 6 degrees of separation. Stanley Milgram did a test in the 1960s called Pass the Parcel test, and that sort of established the 5 to 6 connections. But there was also Dr. Richard Wiseman, who wrote the book called The Luck Factor, who said that it's actually a lot shorter than that. It's usually 3 to 4. And in a lot of cases in business, it's usually 1 or 2.
Mm.
That was only in the early 2000s. So the reality is we're a lot, it's a very small world. And the 6 degrees bit was 6 decades ago, but now it's usually a lot less.
I can only imagine. And also, I mean, for you to be able to crack into that 6 degrees of separation, you need to really know how to win friends or how to actually connect with these people. Now, you've
Yeah.
got skills that not a lot of people actually possess, and I'm intrigued with this. One of them is NLP, and the other one is you training to be a stand-up comedian. And I know
Oh, yeah. Which is
this.
one facet of what I did in Melbourne many years ago. Before I made the move to Sydney, and I've lived back and forth between both capitals for many times, but before I moved to live in Sydney the first time, I made a goal that I wanted to learn comedy secrets for professional speakers off one particular speaker in Sandringham at the time, and it was Pete Croft's Humorversity that I went to. So I met other speakers in the course, because it's one thing to give a talk, but it's another thing to make people laugh and learn enjoyably at the same time, without necessarily being corny or making people puke in the process. So,
Well, you do understand. I think it was Seinfeld that mentioned that some people would rather be in the coffin than be the one who's actually saying the eulogies, just because people have social phobias and afraid of rejection. So it makes it very difficult for people to actually either start a conversation and things of that nature. But you've actually written extensively about overcoming social
yeah,
phobias and
that's
rejection. Yeah.
that's true. In the modern era, I would say that a lot of people are afraid of the camera more
Absolutely.
than they are. I mean, yeah, public speaking is one thing, but just making it today for the majority of people who are watching this, it's surprising how many people are afraid of either getting on the camera or regularly appearing on social media, such as Facebook or YouTube, and making an interesting story, or even doing it beyond just 1 or 2. Oh, I'll just give it a try, and then, or they go on to a seminar to learn how to overcome stuff, but don't get started with doing something. They don't make the baby face stages of trying and failing and doing it long enough. Like I've been running a YouTube channel now for nearly 3 years. And I think it's only when you do something a long period of time that you overcome, but you also develop a different skill set.
I can only imagine. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, we've touched up on a lot of things, and so many people are now intrigued as to, wow, like I did mention, you are the Renaissance man. So there's just so much for us to unravel here. What would be the best way that people can maybe get started on their journey? Maybe read some of your books, see some of the work that you're
Look,
doing with the tours and things of that nature.
look. I suppose I'll give you my link tree, which you can place in the comments. That's probably the easiest way, and let people find their way around the different links that I've got, rather than just saying people to go to one thing alone. David Newton Events is probably the keywords you could use to find my YouTube channel. In some of the videos, you'll see links to other things that I do, as well as my Amazon books and so forth like that. So that's what we, probably the easiest way for people to cover and look at those different options.
Absolutely. I'll definitely
Yeah,
make sure those links are in the show notes below. And
yeah.
obviously, people can get started on a tour around the things that you have actually done. And I like that you've got a link tree. It's like a guided tour in and of itself, from this side to this side.
Well,
So,
it's true. And in this day and age, the last thing you want to do is to have a website name that people aren't, oh, did I spell that right? Or they key something in and 50 other websites that are sponsored comes up on Google. It's easier to use Linktree because it takes all the guesswork out of it.
absolutely. Well, in my world, if you confuse, you lose them. All right. So the more
Yeah.
you confuse people, everyone is busy. We did mention 2 degrees of separation. There's another interesting person that's in their newsfeed that they might as well be able to talk to and things of that nature. But
Yeah, when you go along to a meeting and you can give people a business card that's got a QR code on it, I'm surprised that people say, oh, that's so much better. Like immediately they can connect with you right then and there at the meeting.
I like that.
And that's what you want to make it. You make it, it's what I call lowering the boom. If you make it easy for people to contact you and stay in contact with you, then it's easier for you to follow up or for them to follow up you if you don't have time, because you may not be able to get all their details, or they give you a business card which has got 50 other different things on it and you can't figure out, well, how do I get in touch with this person?
Yes, absolutely. I actually was looking at a business card earlier on today, and it just has their logo and their website. And I was just like, I can't quite remember what you do, so I'm just gonna throw this in the bin. You know what I mean? So it's things like that, and people think
Which is
they're
unfortunate because that person has lost the opportunity to connect again with you. And
absolutely.
you
So
don't
I
need
will
to
put.
sell to people on the first visit. I think the first thing is you need to break the ice with them getting to know who you are so they can get in touch. Afterwards, whether it be a virtual cup of coffee like we're having now, or a face-to-face cup of coffee. And I find that a lot of people either book into my events or turn up at stuff that I do, or I might have someone invited to be a podcast guest on my show as well. So it's things like that. You've just got to make it easy for them to contact you.
Absolutely. Well, we will put that link tree in there, and then people can actually help themselves. Now, David, I can't thank you enough for the time that we've spent on the call today. I mean, it's been a long time in the making, and I just couldn't wait to share you with our audience here. But it would be remiss for me to not ask. I mean, David, you've been through all of this. The way you started your career and your business, and you've just kept going, changing
Yeah.
and evolving as and when needs be. If you would go back to the time where in Wagga Wagga, that shop corner that you were, looking at, and you went on and purchased something from the David Newton young bloke that was still a teenager and, didn't know all about what you now know about life, what sort of advice or words would you leave that young man?
Look, I suppose probably the biggest thing is to um, look. I'd probably say the standard type of advice. Oh, I wish I'd done this a little bit sooner, or that. But you don't know. Life is. There's one thing that I subscribe to, which I remember reading by a book by Al Rees and Jack Trout, and there was a lot of quotes sprinkled in this particular book about picking a horse to ride, and that is one of the quotes in it was by a particular successful business person. It says, he said, a lot of the people who talk about 5-year plans or 10-year plans at business schools and so forth like that, they rarely ever get to fill them, because all of those fancy plans that have a positive figure at the end of it, of what you're doing, doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to come off, because life is like spaghetti. It crisscrosses and connects in all different ways that you're least expecting. And this particular speaker says it's how you take advantage of luck that comes your way rather than you can create a certain amount of luck, but it's also there's opportunities that land on your desk every day. It's being able to recognize it and then be able to say, well, what can I do with this? You know, you heard the saying, every day is a clean sheet of paper. Well, it's a question of you've got opportunities there. How can you take advantage of what's there in front of you today? And the more you take advantage of that, you will enjoy what's there in front of you. You may not necessarily know what's going to be ahead in the future. You might think that you're under the illusion that you can plan a lot of the stuff, but I believe it's a case of taking advantage of where luck lands right on your desk.
I like that. I like that. And I don't know if you knew this, David. My wife is Italian, so every
Ah,
night is usually a pasta dish and things of that nature. And you can, looking at a pasta dish or spaghetti, on its own, one strand won't fulfill you, but a whole bunch of them will. So
yes,
is life. You know what I mean? Just one aspect is not going to be the thing that actually, satisfies you and things of that nature. And another thing about spaghetti as well is unless you actually control it and give it a bit of direction, you won't be able to put
yes,
all of them into your mouth. So
yes.
such is life as well, that you're gonna have to actually manipulate it a little bit so that it suits the direction of which you want to go. Oh, I think we've just gotten onto something here talking
Well,
about.
true. And that's what being an entrepreneur is about. It's being able to look at things differently and take control of the situation as best as you can. Everyone's got a different entrepreneurial personality. Some people are very quiet and they're quiet achievers. And some of those ones that you see on the big stages were promoted by the big companies and so forth. And they might be the loudmouths or whatever, but it's look, I once co-managed a cafe with a mate of mine years ago up in Brisbane. And I've spoken to a lot of coffee shop owners. They're a completely different breed to that of all of the motivational and get rich quick type speakers that you see out there these days. Yet they still succeed. They still manage to do this without necessarily reading books or whatever, that type of thing. So just when you think you might know all of the angles out there, there's always somebody out there who is achieving that success in a different way. So you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself thinking that you know all of the answers all the time. There are other people out there who are succeeding in a different way to you. Just be open-minded is what I'm saying.
I like that. I like that a lot. Now, David, I mean, obviously, there's so much that we could talk about and
Sure.
things of that nature. And I like how you brought about, those people that have charts and goals and, numbers, visions, or whatever. Some of them usually don't even come to pass. And you actually experienced that yourself. You had at some point a time where you gave yourself a goal to write 10 books, but you failed at that and you came up
Yeah.
with 50. So it's things like
Yeah.
that.
Well, I suppose it's a case of, look, I read a few books on how to write books fast. Once again, this was before AI, as we know it. This is before like you would have to buy drag and dictate, but I didn't go down those pathways. I learned how to type this stuff up with a fold-up keyboard and so forth like that at a cafe. And I think if you can write probably say 2,000 to 7,000 words, and 7,000 words in a day is the most I'd ever written. But my average probably would have been around about the 1 to 2,000 words per day. And then I would not edit that until later on. And I put
Mm.
those pieces together. If I was writing a fiction book, I would work out, if it was like a multiple book series, I would work out, well, where are the characters going to be a bit further down the track? So I would work out some kind of a plan there, because in order to write out a story, you need to work out where the twist points are going to be. You're going to take the audience down a particular direction, where it's going to go.
Mm,
A non-fiction book is relatively easy, but a fiction book, you want to take the reader on a journey
absolutely.
because
No,
they're buying escapism.
I like that. Now, David. I mean, obviously, you are obviously the original BG. Before Google, and now you are before AI, and all of these things. What's next? What can people expect from you? I know there's
Look, I don't have a clear-cut answer for that. All I can say is that I enjoy doing things that get people together. I enjoy writing the odd story or two that makes people entertained. So I am working on stories which are probably modelled a bit from real life that you might see in the press, um, but make a fictionalised version of some of those. That's probably the best way I can describe it. Yeah, if there's anything that's a real hot button topic out there that's controversial, that makes for a good book topic in fiction form. Just that I've recreated those original people in real life into fictional form in my version of it, so I won't get sued for defaming the character in a different way.
protecting the innocent. But also, what's a little bit scary about that, David? We're living in a world where what used to be fiction is now real life, and real life is now actual fiction and fodder for content. But I can't thank you enough for sharing your incredible journey with us today, David. I mean, your life story and your experience have so much value for so many people out there that if somebody just takes a bit of a snippet of what we just spoke about, they would literally change their life. I mean, how to meet
Well,
people and
if
things of
not,
that
at
nature.
least be entertained.
Yeah. I mean, from conquering the world of self-publishing to actually bringing people together through social events, we live in a world where we seemingly are connected, but we're the most disconnected people, and you're doing that.
Well, that's
Uh,
true. I believe that we probably spend too much time on screen time. That's why even when I go out to a coffee shop and I might be doing some screen time, I can talk to a lot of the other people there at the same time. So
mm,
if you don't take some time of the day away from being in the home office and so forth like that, you will miss a fair bit of the life go by past you.
Absolutely.
That's
Well, let's take
true.
our viewers off of this screen now because obviously they've been on a lot of screen time. But be sure to check out David's books on Amazon and his fantastic YouTube channel. And I know there's something for everyone on there. And I will also put the link tree link right in the comment section in the notes section there. And if you've actually enjoyed this episode, don't forget to actually maybe share this with your network, because you never know who this might reach, or if somebody is stuck in either wanting to write a book or just connect with other fellow business people. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can catch more valuable content and amazing guests like David. And if you're in Sydney or in Melbourne, be sure to join some of his social events. They are to die for. But thank you so much for tuning in to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. Bye for now.